So hello, I'm super excited. In just a few minutes, I will be inviting Dr. Shefali live with me. Dr. Shefali, I've connected with her work some time ago and so in alignment with the way I think, the way I conceptualize psychology, the field, the work, all of the things. Very similar to my own journey. Dr. Shefali came through the system as a clinical psychologist and is really working with kind of merging the field, the Eastern and the Western. So she's been an incredible source of inspiration for me and my work. And now that I have the opportunity to connect with her live and to introduce you all to her work, if you haven't yet heard of her, I am super excited to do so. So a little bit about Dr. Shefali before we get started. Dr. Shefali received her doctorate degree in clinical psychology from Columbia University, specializing in the integration of Western psychology and Eastern philosophy. She brings together the best of both worlds for her clients. She is an expert in family dynamics and personal development, teaching courses around the globe. She has written 4 books, 3 of which are New York Times bestsellers, including her 2 landmark books that some of you might already be familiar with, The Conscious Parent and The Awakened Family. And today, we're going to be talking about her very newest book, A Radical Awakening. I blew through this book. If you guys can see, I have a lot dog-eared in there because it is so, so good.
Dr. Shefali, hello.
Hello, hello.
How are you?
Good. I'm so happy to meet you. You know, I was at Lewis House's place doing an interview, and he said, "Oh, you need to read this book and you need to meet her." And so here we are. We've done it.
Here we are. I have been such a fan of your work and watching your own journey, and very similar to mine, figuring out a way to kind of move the field in a direction. And I just think you are such a trailblazer. So thank you for everything you've been putting out in the world. And like I said, I'm super excited I know a lot of my community probably is very familiar with you and your work, but for those who aren't, I'm super excited to introduce them because I know that they're going to gain just as much benefit as I have.
Thank you so much. And I'm so honored to be here, really.
Of course. So let's start because I think you break your book down. I blew through it. I don't know if you saw me saying that. I have all of these great parts that I want to talk to you about or that resonated with me. The first thing that I was really struck by, Dr. Shefali, is how you broke down the sections of the book. With the first one really jumped out at me, Asleep in the Matrix. So I know a lot of us are throwing this a word around, matrix, these days, and what pill are you going to take? So talk to me a little bit about what you mean when you say matrix and what do you mean when you say we're asleep? Many of us, I should say, are asleep in this matrix.
Sure. So what I describe as the matrix is that we are living in a culture that we think predetermines the way we should be because we don't understand that it's constructed. So we live within it as if it's a mandate, a doctrine, a cage where we don't understand that it's a bubble and it literally can change like that. It's like by the flick of the finger. But because it's been brainwashed into us, we think it has caged metal bars that keep us inside, subscribing to it. So the radical awakening occurs when you understand that the cage you live within is a bubble that you can burst with the flick of your finger if your consciousness is ready for it.
Such an incredible visual to think of and such an empowering statement to make, though I know a lot of listeners are probably listening from inside the bubble. I know that's where really my own journey of healing and then my own clinical journey and shifting my practice came when I too was stuck inside that bubble, but I was wondering why I was so bad at being a psychologist and helping people get out of that bubble because I really understood how stuck you do feel. And I use the word conditioning when I think about the influences, the cycle of influences. And I think that's what you mean when you say, what is the impact? What's forming that bubble? And how does our conditioning really remove us from, you use a word that's very similar to a word I've used, is essence. Yes. And like that part within. And I know here in my community, we're always searching for our intuition, our inner knowing, yet we're stuck in the bubble of that disconnection. And I just love the way you describe that because those bars are real.
Right. So you and I know as psychologists that there's nothing that can beat the conditioning of the early years. I mean, it's an indomitable force that is like glue. It's like super glue. And we as therapists, we're trying to peel the person away. And we both know that because we are all surviving that ferocious hunger from childhood, we've created these masks, right? And these masks that I call ego, I'm sure you call it ego or something like that, these false personas keep us in that very much tethered inside the cage. So in my book, A Radical Awakening, I talk about the two layers to radically awaken. The first layer is to know that it's happening to you. There's a matrix that you're living within that is effing with your brain. And the second part is now you are doing it to yourself, right? So the real radical part happens, especially when we women, the oppressed, wake up and go, okay, now I'm doing it to myself. I am like worse toward myself and my sisters than any man out there can ever be. And that's when you begin to wake up and you realize that you've internalized all that's loathing and all that shame and that it lives within you.
Yes, absolutely. You've internalized the word that you revisit often in your book is expectation. And I want to read a line, and it's going to be, I'm going to speak the word women and gender, but I think we could even blow this out to all, though, in terms of your book, you wrote, and this was really poignant. Most women are trained from early girlhood to crave what I call the triple threat: the need for approval, validation, and praise. So just to get a little bit more concrete, right, when we're talking about the expectations, I do think that I loved how you worded that, the kind of expectation, the need for the approval, the meeting the expectation of others so that we can get validated and praised. And the way you're saying, yeah, it begins outside of us, though we become then the militant in our army where we're now doing it on repeat. Some of us not even aware that we have that power in our minds.
Yeah, we're like robots in the army of our own self-destruction and we're the commanders in chief, right? So as children, because we girls especially more than men and boys are trained to get our validation from what we do best. What do we do best? We are natural healers, nurturers, tribe builders, connectors. This is in our emotional DNA. But because we do it so beautifully, culture has marauded us to the point that we now lose ourselves in the giving. So we give, but in the giving, we are losing. And we're so conditioned to receive our validation. Am I even worthy of existence from the outside world? So we become people pleasers or achievers or really, super nurturers or the perfect mother, the perfect wife. We're seeking validation like a drug through those expectations we put on ourselves. We don't realize we are drug addicts, yeah? Addicts to the drugs of validation, approval, and praise.
I'm smiling because seeking that perfection, that word is something that really kind of at my core. And for a very long time, Dr. Shefali, I, obviously coming through the incredible amount of schooling that you and I went to, right? That's the obvious, obviously seeking the achievement, the degree, the letters after my name. I understood that I sought validation in those ways. I like to be perfect, to be seen as best. However, I didn't see how pervasive that was to the extent that any expectation I would put on myself, even in my relationships, to be the type of partner I wanted to be or thought I could be, was that drive to that perfection. And when I didn't meet my own expectation, or to complicate things, the expectation that I imagined someone else had of me, I would beat myself up. And I didn't realize for a very long time how pervasive that drive for perfection was. Because I think a lot of us naturally intuitive, like, oh yeah, achievement, degrees, accolades. So I think a lot of us push ourselves in many different ways and we're not even aware of it.
I know. We're just like compulsive, like it's just in our emotional wiring, and we don't even see that it is something that we have inherited because we grew up like that. And we can see it when we begin to break down. So breaking down as a therapist in a weird way is the gift, right? And as a therapist, we are waiting for rock bottom. We're like, when will this person wake up? And that's a terrible thing to want, but it's a beautiful desire because we know it's coming. And so when is the wake-up call going to be the real wake-up call? So, people don't even know that when their jaw is clenched, that is anxiety. When their chest is palpitating, that is anxiety. When they're cursing and yelling all the time or eating 10 cookies a day, that is yourself out of alignment. Something is awry, screaming, help me, help me. And we're not listening because our robotic compulsion is to keep going. But one day it's going to break down because the false self cannot last. And that is an opportunity for a radical awakening. It is the radical awakening moment, but we're so afraid of it that we run back into our shell.
Yes, yes. Well, the unfamiliar, as we talk about in my community, at extent, is very uncomfortable. It is something to run from. But you're bringing up another point that I think is interesting here, and I love what you do in your book. So the point you're bringing up is for so many of us, Dr. Shefali, we haven't known any different. These are masks that we have been wearing from as young as we can remember. And you present this whole, I think it's in your Confronting the Shadow section, of all of the different faces of ego, where, for lack of a better word, archetype comes to mind for me, just because that's what I call it. But you do you do provide these roles, right? You do show, like, these are masks that so many of us wear. And the point being, I think, is that we wear that for so long, and we may maybe feel the effects of it. We might feel disconnected. We might feel unfulfilled. Some of us might even feel angry and resentful of the world around us because our needs are consistently not met, though we don't have a point of contrast because there's no other way we've known. So I love how you provide, and I think that's what's such an incredible, the whole book from front to back. But I think that people are really helped when they're able to see themselves in these shadows that you present. So I think you did a really, really great job. And I'd love for you to say a little bit about the shadows and then again, the role that they play.
So that's why books like yours and mine are so, I'm praising ourselves, I just realized, but it's okay. It's okay. The reason why they're good books is because, like you said, we don't know that we're going through an experience. It's nebulous. It's what we've always done. It's the fish in the water, doesn't understand it's wet. So we need somebody to show, oh my goodness, that's me. That's me. This is the path. So in my book, I separated it into the different journey, the different aspects of the journey. The first part is that to recognize you're asleep. How to know I'm asleep? So I talk about that, and I use my own example very deeply about how I was asleep. And I was in a haze and a daze and a fog. And then the next phase is where you begin to wake up. And the first thing you have to confront are these false selves that you've been living. I've been living like a people pleaser all my life. I've been living as a conflict avoider. Oh, shoot. So the different faces that I talk about, archetypes, are the ones that I see women typically take are the givers, such as the empath, the savior, the bleeding empath, the savior, like you and I are, and how we must constantly gain our validation from the act of giving. And the act of giving is polluted with a desire to receive validation back. It's not pure giving. And then the controllers are the perfectionists, the tyrants, the passive aggressive ones, the shield, the strong one, the helicopter. And then the takers, no one likes to think they're a taker, but every one of us is a taker, is the diva in us, the princess who just wants to wait for it to happen, where we're like, oh, I'm supposed to take charge of my life? What? I thought I'll just be picked and become the queen of the world. So I lay out these archetypes. And then after you understand who you are and how you've played your false self, the next section in my book, I talk about embracing your sexuality. Why? Because we as women have been so blasphemized to be in our sexual energy. We've been labeled sluts, whores, all the words. So we have great shame about our vagina and we don't explore it. And in our lack of sexual freedom and exploration, we actually give in to the patriarchy. We actually allow the patriarchy to have its power over us because we believe we need a man or we need a relationship. So the patriarchy, keeps us controlled, keeps us small. And then the next section, I talk about awakening, cracking the matrix. What does that mean? Well, now you have to do the real work. You have to examine your belief systems around love, around marriage, around goodness, around youth, around beauty. So I talk about that. And then the last section is, how do you really awaken? Books like ours help people to place themselves on the continuum of consciousness, to go, oh, I'm there. Oh, I've done that. And you begin to have a synergistic experience with your sister, the author, and you realize you're not alone.
Yes, yes. I love how you break it down too into the evolution of the journey. Because I see, and we're human, and we want the roadmap. We want to know how long this step will take, and then when I can progress on to step 2, so I can neatly check step 1's box. And unfortunately, when we're talking about healing, when we're talking about, right, developing the conscious awakening, it's not as clean, it's not as linear. And so I love how you're overviewing the process, allowing for all of the individual variation within, that it isn't a neat, linear, easy step where there's a 1, 2, 3 model to follow, but these are generally the stages of the process. And I want to read one more line from your book because I think it's so beautiful. And I love how you talk about love. And I think about love a lot because I think about relationships a lot. At the heart of us as humans are the relationships that we're in, and how connected we are to not only ourselves, but of course then by extension, the people and the world around us. And the way you write these 2 sentences on love, I just think is so beautiful. And you write, love is the ultimate energy. It is the self fully actualized. And I just love that because, well, I love love, but that is just so, for me, an important piece of the whole picture. Because if we want to tie on these masks and love, right, to me, I see all of this conditioned way of being, just to use all the language we've been using, all of these masks, all of this ego, all of this shadow, from, in my perspective, that's a separation from the love that we are at our core. And as we begin to awaken and peel all of this back, the way you word it and the way I hear it, at least, is so beautiful. We actually regain then access to that which we already were. So it's not that we're seeking, I think about this a lot, for the things outside of me and for the love that I can find somewhere else. We're unearthing that beautiful self-love energy that some of us might not believe me. I'm watching the comments because we might not have been connected to that energy for a very long time. But that, in my opinion, is the journey home. And I just love that. So I'm going to read it one more time. Love is the ultimate energy. It is the self fully actualized. I chills. So beautiful.
Yeah. It takes away this idea that you have to find love, you have to fall in love. It has nothing to do ultimately with the external. And the reason why love has messed up so many relationships is because the idea of love is that it has to do with the other. What we don't understand, the actualized self is love embodied. And when you are at that level of frequency, whatever word you want to use it, whatever you want to use for it, then you automatically are going to move towards relationships where you can keep at that frequency. So there's no seeking love, looking for love, falling in love, upset about love, betrayed in love. Those concepts fall away. There's no betrayal. There's no forgiving. Those are concepts that exist in the dualistic world of me versus you. When you understand that everything is bouncing off your own energy, nobody can betray you because it's bouncing off you. So you're part of it. And so in this book, I talk a lot about that our ultimate power comes, especially as women, in our co-creation, in our understanding of our co-creation. You're not a victim. You're not a blamer. Nobody's done anything to you on the emotional level. On the physical level, people can harm us. But on the emotional level, ultimately, our radical awakening occurs when we realize our co-creation in our own oppression, right? I write that the lion of the patriarchy can only be fed by the civility of the oppressed, right? There is no outside oppressor without the civility of the oppressed. So we are playing our part. And how are we playing our part? When we look in the mirror and we objectify ourselves way more than any man has ever done, right? They may just say, oh, you have a flat ass, or oh, you're so whatever, or oh, you're so beautiful. But we go, no, no, no. Do you see this? And do you see this? I mean, we are insane. Yeah. We are the surgical critics beyond belief. So who is the ultimate oppressor? Right. We are.
Right. If we can, the thought I had too, Dr. Shefali, right there, you're saying that is, if some of us can even look in the mirror, right? So many of us even avert our eyes, struggle to even see the physicality that is us. Mirror work, I think, because maybe I'm even speaking from my own experience, it's hard. It's hard
Yes.
to look at yourself, and then the tendency is to look in judgment of ourselves. And you're right. Oftentimes, I say the critical voice, we become the worst enemy. We do become the conditioning that then lives within our head that keeps us trapped, going back beautifully full circle in the bubble. And to empower ourselves, I love that. I actually just got off of a workshop for my Self Healer Circle where we talked all about our energy in the context of the energy as it connects with the world around us, the energy of other people and the energy of the world, and how ultimately the goal is to empower ourselves to use the energy that is us, the love energy, the presence that we are. You use that word in your book. I love that, talking about the role of presence, being here, right? And how shifting into that space can be empowering. It can be devastating. There was many participations I had to look at, roles I was playing, masks I was wearing, right? The way I was contributing to not happy, healthy energy, that was painful for me to see in reflection. Though in doing that, it allowed me to create a new reality. And that's what your book does, A Radical Awakening. I've been seeing a couple questions coming in. So anyone who wants the name A Radical Awakening, we'll make sure that when this goes up, we have all of your contact info. But tell us where we can find you, buy your book, learn more from you, Dr. Shefali.
Thank you. So they can go to Dr. for Dr. Shefali, SHEFALI.com. They can grab a copy of the book wherever they want and find me on Instagram. And on Instagram, I think I'm Doctor with a DOCTOR, Shefali. Thank you so much, Nicole, for all the work you do. I hope we work together more. And your community seems so into healing and so enlightened. So thank you for having me.
Of course. Yeah, everyone is very excited. We'll make sure that all of your information is linked. Definitely go join Dr. Shefali's community. Definitely pick up her book. I can't recommend it more. It's a great, helpful toolkit just to A, learn about awakening, and B, to help yourself through it. And it is such an empowering process. And like I said, when we began, you are such an inspiration for me and have been very impactful in my own journey. So I will take this moment before we end to selfishly say thank you one last time from my heart to yours. It is knowing that other humans are walking similar journeys that keeps me showing up each and every day. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicole. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Of course. Bye. Thank you,
Bye.
everyone, for sharing your time and space with us today.